We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com.
Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. My name is Rob H., and this week I am here with
Lee Overstreet, pinch hitting once again. I think this is my first time in 2024, right?
It is, I think. Yeah, my goodness. Happy New Year, Lee. We're
Why, thank you.
through the first whole month already, but it's going by much too quickly, but that's just the way it goes as we get older. It just goes ever faster. But yeah, Happy New Year. Welcome back. It's very nice to have you here. Now, Tom is away this week because there is more construction, more fixing going on at his place, and apparently there was something very noisy taking place right during our normal podcast recording time this week, and he does not have any other time during the week when he could postpone, rearrange to do things, so that is all right. We always like to have Lee back every once in a while without too long a gap, so that works out just fine.
I know, I'm aging very quickly. I have a birthday in 2 days as we sit here.
Oh, there we go.
So yeah, it's a round-ish number. It's one of those middle round numbers I don't want to talk about.
Okay.
So let's just say I'm a little nervous about my new camera setup.
Well, this is just it. You're going to have to come over to YouTube once again, folks, because if you've ever wanted to see Lee in absolute crystal clear clarity, it's an all
it's
brand
gonna be
new
like,
over here.
what happened to Lee? He's like 12 years older all of a sudden. So you can see every wrinkle now. I may have to do some adjustments and soften this picture. I don't know.
That could be it. Well, there's all kinds of wonderful filters these days. Some of them even quite subtle that aren't super noticeable. So that would be the
I
way
need to
go.
do that real bad. I don't know if Skype has that or what. I'm going to figure it out.
Right. I am noticing that I'm going to have to very much limit any of my chuckling and laughing this week because I am quite under the weather. Feeling last 2 days I was really sick. Pretty decent fever was going there, and lots of coughing and blowing of noses and whatnot. So yeah, I'm still not feeling that great. Fever seems to have broken, although I'm still a little bit on the warm side. Not within fever range, but
well, you are a very resilient human being because you look and sound very normal at the moment. So congrats on you're on the upswing, right?
Yeah, I'm definitely on the getting better
upswing
side of things.
Right,
if I had gotten worse, I wouldn't have done that. But yeah, we'll see if that lasts for 2 hours because I definitely think my voice is going to start giving out later on in the show. And you know what? I'm going to attempt, if I feel a cough coming on, to mute my microphone. But you know how coughs are. Sometimes they sneak up on you. So if that happens, I apologize ahead of time.
It's part of the world, man. Just it happens.
If I disappear and become a logo for a while, it's because nobody needs to see me blowing my nose. And if I come back,
I'll just ramble on about my life.
If I come back slightly teary-eyed, it's because I had a coughing fit. So all of those warnings given beforehand.
It's all good. It's all good.
But with that preamble out of the way, why don't we go ahead and introduce what this podcast is? This is, of course, AV Rant. We are your home theater and AV questions answered. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is email us. Question@avrant.com is the email address. That is by far the best way to reach out to us. Question@avrant.com. But of course, we do have our website, avrant.com, where you can come and look at the show notes. Those will have links to products that we talk about or articles that we're referencing, as well as links to a Flickr album where you can look at images that are pertinent to what we're talking about. We'll have those on our YouTube version as well. You can find that youtube.com/avrant for our channel there. And then you can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/avrant podcast. We're also available to be contacted individually if you'd like. So we're available, all three of us, via email. Yeah. Tom is tom@avrant.com. I am rob@avrant.com. And Lee is lee@avrant.com.
I'm still proud of that. I know it's been a while now, but made me, you guys made me wait so long for
delayed gratification. That's what it does for you. It makes the happy feeling last longer as well.
Yeah, it feels really good to have.
That's what it's all about. Yes, lee@avrant.com if you want to reach out to Lee directly. We are on social medias. I mean, Tom, not so much because, he can't get on Threads still, and he's been suspended on X because someone hacked his account. He never bothered to resolve that, so he's just not on X, and he
just needs to start fresh. Pretty much, just start fresh. Get new accounts.
He's on
just
Facebook.
Move on.
That's his social media of choice. But if I'm on a social media, which these days is mostly Threads for me, you can find me at First Reflect, and then we've still got our old graphics. So I've still got at Lee Overtweet for finding you on X, which,
I mean, that's my
it is still your handle
account.
There. Yes,
it is. I just don't use it much.
That's right.
Because I've generated so much more action and back and forth and talking with my Tesla Lusa account. That's a combination of Tesla and Tuscaloosa.
Yes.
So because I'm into EVs and energy stuff, I created that, and that got sort of busy. I've got followers there, so I just use it more. What can I say?
Absolutely, that is works on both.
Lee Overtweet is fine, but I'm not going to see it as fast.
That's
Tesla Lusa is faster if I'm on Threads or if I'm on X.
Yeah.
But emailing me if it's show related here is
Yes.
probably your quickest way to get to Lee at avrant.com.
Yep, but yeah, Tesla Lusa, both Threads and X. Even if someone changes the name of one of those services, Tesla Lusa will still work just fine as a pun. So that all works out. Okay. So not sure how long this episode will go because just the way I'm feeling, and we didn't have a ton of questions, although some of them are fairly lengthy answers for sure. So if this ends up being a little bit shorter episode, we're going to leave it at that. I'm not going to bother stretching anything this week. Yeah, we do like to start with what we've watched. So Lee, why don't you go ahead? It's been a while. So what have you been watching?
It has. My two big things lately, I finally found some sci-fi series that I'm into. Now, first of all, I found Silo on Apple TV Plus.
Yes, indeed.
We got a subscription, a free 90-day subscription somehow.
Yeah.
And that's plenty of time to watch the things I needed to watch.
Yeah.
And Silo seemed right? Like that sounds like it's kind of cool. Then I watched it and now I'm obsessed.
Yes.
So I am ready to talk to anyone that wants to talk about Silo. I need to discuss things.
That could be me. I very much enjoyed that show.
Let's you and me talk about it. Now. You haven't read the books, right?
I have not read the books.
Okay, good. Yeah. I don't want any book people.
Okay.
I'm married to a librarian, so I love book people. But I don't want any book people coming in and ruining this for me. Don't tell me anything ahead. I tried to look at Reddit, and they have to blank and censor stuff out because there's so many spoilers, especially from the books.
I would think so.
And as it is for a series on something like Apple TV, the picture quality and sound quality was good. I don't think it blew me away. Nothing really stood out, but it's a very dark series, right? So OLED definitely helpful. After all, it's in a silo underground.
Get that contrast and shadow detail, and when black is actually black, then you can tell the difference between black and just above black.
Right. A few of the characters weren't the best. Some of it every now and then is a little eye-rolling. There's some tropes in there that I could do without. And some of those actors, I don't know if they're the greatest. But overall, the whole thing is just so compelling as a sci-fi concept. And without any spoilers, don't worry, I wouldn't spoil it for anybody. I'll just say that the very end of the whole series, I just stood up and walked out of the living room. I'm like, what?
Well, end of the season, because there is going to be at least a second season. It was delayed because of writer strike, actor strike. That did delay the beginning of the production as they had intended. But yes, there is a second season all the way.
And then the second show is For All Mankind, also available there. So For All Mankind, I've been watching all the seasons, and so I'm completely caught up now. And that was even better than Silo. Good. So if you're a space nerd, if you like the space program and you're not sure what For All Mankind is, it's a what if fictional scenario.
Alternate alternate history.
Yeah. It all starts a few seasons ago with what if the Soviet Union got to the moon first?
Yeah.
And from there, it has grown into this crazy thing where they carry you through time, and the characters there are all amazing. You know what I love a lot is when I'm watching a series or a movie where I don't actually recognize any actors. That's one of my favorite things. Because sometimes if somebody's too famous, it takes me out of it. And nobody, I mean, although people in For All Mankind I've seen in other things, barely. But it's just not distracting like, if just a big name actor is in it.
It's not like Tom Cruise shows up smiling in your face.
Right, because then it's just Tom Cruise.
That's right.
And then every character is Tom Cruise. So I like it for that. The Audio video in this series is actually probably a little better than Silo, in my opinion. The computer graphics are pretty good. Every now and then you kind of take it out of it and go, it kind of looks like a video game, but not too bad. And here's the most important thing if you're a science nerd. They come awful close to scientific accuracy in this show. So there's not any make-believe stuff. It's all unlikely. Because they have to make an interesting show out of it, right? But it's all... The physics is there, put it that way. You know, there's a delay when they communicate back and forth with Mars. That sort of thing.
Yeah, there definitely would be with Mars. Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, definitely. So everything seems correct. But you'll find this. Let me tell you one thing real quick before we move on. You will find this funny. I don't know when it happened, but at some point on my OLED, I accidentally had it. Don't know how this happened. On ISF dark mode.
Sure.
And I am used to watching it on ISF bright mode.
Okay.
And it was subtle enough that it didn't dawn on me why I was thinking, gosh, this basketball game looks a little dark. Is it dark in the Coliseum? What's going on? I felt like the dumbest AV nerd. I don't know how it got on dark mode. And here I am complaining. It reminded me of when I was 19 and had to get glasses.
Right.
And I was like, why don't they make these road signs bigger so I can see them?
Right, yes, yeah.
It's not me. It's definitely the road signs. And so I'm watching TV going, why is this dark?
I do have my suspicions that the pursuit of ever-increasing brightness in TVs has more to do with people not wanting to admit that they need glasses than it does with people actually needing brighter TVs. Because I think there's a lot of people out there who are like, I have to squint at my TV. If only it were brighter, I could see it better. I'm like, you probably just need some prescription glasses. That's my
and there's
suspicion.
been times I've seen like blooming effects on the OLED, and I'm like, oh wait, that's me.
Yeah.
that's this.
That's your eyeballs
that's
and the
my
glasses in
eyeballs
front of them.
Yeah. It's so go clean your glasses, people.
No kidding. Well, that's good. I'm glad you're enjoying those shows. Yeah, I have not watched For All Mankind, but I did watch Silo and very much enjoyed it. So yeah, those.
I think For All Mankind, anyone could enjoy it if they like any sci-fi, but especially if you're a nerd for the real life NASA stuff that has occurred over the past 50 years. If you like that, oh my God, go watch it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I took in a couple of movies this week as well. I started off early. I was actually like last week after we recorded the podcast. I wanted something just light and breezy, and I didn't want any more heavy stuff because I've been watching a lot of heavy stuff. So I just went ahead and watched Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken, which is a DreamWorks animated feature. It was in theaters. Didn't seem to make any big waves in any sort of way. I'm not sure if it's successful enough that it'll become some sort of a franchise. But this movie, first of all, the cast in it, they did the classic thing where they took the elder characters and made them very well-known names. It's starring Jane Fonda and Toni Collette and Will Forte as like the adult characters in this movie. And then the younger characters are people who, looking them up on IMDb, yes, they've been in other things, but not like super huge famous names. So Ruby Gillman herself, the teenage Kraken, was played by Lana Condor. Now, she would be known to you if you've watched Netflix's To All the Boys movies. She's the star in those, but I haven't watched those, so I wasn't particularly familiar with her. And then Annie Murphy, who... Again, you might know if you've watched Schitt's Creek, but that's about the only thing that she's really famous from. She was probably my favorite vocal performance in this. She played the new girl, who was absolutely hilarious, and just the inflections that she put on her voice, I got a really big kick out of. I enjoyed every minute that her character was on the screen. But the way this movie starts, just visually, because it just starts in her bedroom with just the main character, and small scale, and just the design of the character, Ruby Gillman herself, and like what you could see in the small little frame, just looking in her bedroom and that, I was like, oh, this is like TV CG quality. Like it didn't look particularly impressive. There was a bit of texture on her to like make her look a bit slimy because she's supposed to be a Kraken. But it was pretty unimpressive to begin with, which was very misleading because relatively quickly it's like, okay, this definitely isn't a TV level production, because once she steps outside of her door and you see the town that she's living in, well, they've got oodles and oodles of characters and movement on screen that typically they just wouldn't pay for in a TV production. You're like, okay, there's the movie budget there, just sheer number of characters that I'm seeing on screen. But honestly, the quality of this movie seemed to get better and better as it went along. Like by the end, they had this character on screen who, like, we've seen characters on screen before where their hair is like made out of some other material. And in this case, it was hair that's made out of water, but it wasn't just like flowing water or waterfall water. It was like roiling white crested water that was making up their hair. And it was like really well done. It was like a really good effect, which I know is like simulation effect. It's not like someone was drawing every particle by hand, but like they put some money into that. So unlike most movies that seem to run out of money by the time they get to the end, this one was like, oh, we're gonna save our money and like dole it out a little bit at a time and then save it for the end.
I wonder how much animation is going to be affected by AI, because it seems to me like you could just type in what you want. Roiling white water hair, you just type it in, and 5 years from now just make that. If not today.
It is only going to get easier.
Animation
and more impressive,
will get ever cheaper to do. You're just going to be paying more to Will Forte and Jane Fonda.
That very much could be it. But I mean, the story in this, I mean, it's of course rather predictable. There's the little twists here and there that, yeah, if you've watched anything else before, you can see them coming a mile away. The character who's like being friendly who isn't actually friendly, and the character who seems kind of mean who's actually friendly. Those little twists in the teenage story are not super surprising. They avoided doing some kind of weird love triangle, which I was happy about, because you sort of expect those in a teenage comedy, but they didn't really go for that. I don't want to. It's a minor spoiler. They say it right at the beginning. I did get a big chuckle out of the fact that the way that they explain that they are Krakens living amongst humans and no one seems to notice that they have tentacles and blue skin is they just tell everyone they're from Canada. And everyone's just like, yeah, all right.
So it reminds me of South Park. Everybody in Canada just has that different look.
Yep, that was about it. So I was like, okay, that's A-okay.
That's actually pretty cute.
Yeah, we're definitely the ones to make fun of for something like that, because nobody here is going to get offended by that. So that was very much entertaining. And yeah, overall, absolutely. If you just want something fun, lighthearted, very much enjoyable, gonna have a few laughs. Is it gonna be the greatest movie you've ever watched? Absolutely not, but it is certainly an easy way to pass 90 minutes. It's a tight, fun story, and I can absolutely give it a thumbs up.
Sometimes you need that.
Yeah, once in a while, it's a very nice palate cleanser. So Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken, don't know if it'll get a sequel, but honestly, I wouldn't be mad at all if it did. If they can do something similar again, that would be fantastic. The other movie that I watched was The Neon Demon, which came out in 2016, stars Elle Fanning. Now, she would have been 18 at the time. She's playing a character who is supposed to be 16 for real, but then pretending to be 19 so that she can do adult things. Now, Elle Fanning herself is, at least the director had the sort of good taste to not be too wildly explicit with her at that age, even though this is a fairly explicit movie in other ways. They kind of protected her a little bit, which was, I sort of appreciated they did that. Also starring Jenna Malone, and then Keanu Reeves is in this. He's certainly not the star in any way, but he's in several scenes. Christina Hendricks is in a scene or two. So we've got some good actors in this movie, and it was directed and written by Nicholas Winding Refn, who I only knew as the director of Drive. That was a Ryan Gosling movie that got a fair amount of press and traction in that.
I think I meant to see that one.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed Drive. It had a fair amount of criticism leveled at it, of it being exceedingly slow-paced, of Ryan Gosling essentially having zero expression throughout the entire movie, which
he's Ryan Gosling. See, that if you're too famous, you just show up as yourself.
Well, I guess, but I mean, Ryan Gosling kind of got pigeonholed into being expressionless characters for a number of years there. So I kind of followed him into Blade Runner 2049 and a couple other movies where he really didn't show much expression, which is kind of why people react so strongly to him. His performance as Ken in Barbie, where he's so animated, and that kind of surprised people who had forgotten how much of a goofball he can be, because in a lot of his earlier career, he was a gigantic goofball. But yeah. So you've got a lot of talent behind this movie. People who have done a lot of good things. The Neon Demon is bad. It is a bad movie, and it's not bad enough that I can enjoy how bad it is.
Oh no,
it's just a bad movie.
That's the worst bad.
it is the worst kind of bad. I mean, I was seriously considering just turning off the movie and walking away from it. But I do like to make myself watch a bad movie every now and again.
Sure.
I think it's actually, in a way, a little bit important. If you watch a lot of movies, look, if you got even less time than I have to enjoy this hobby, then don't waste your time on bad movies. And if that's you, don't watch The Neon Demon. It ain't worth your time. But I like to make myself watch a bad movie every once in a while because it helps that compare and contrast. Trying to figure out why was this bad, especially when, look, it's not that the actors don't have the ability because we're talking, Elle Fanning, Jenna Malone, Keanu Reeves, these people are able to do good performances. Not when the dialogue is this atrocious, not when the director just chooses to, he loves his long, slow, even I'm just doing a close-up of someone's face, but you can still tell just by the subtle movements of their face that it was shot in slow motion to slow it down even more. All of those things aside, I don't know. I couldn't.
Just bad.
It's just a bad movie.
Bad.
It was so self-serious. It wasn't the type of bad where you're like, oh, I can laugh at it satirically or farcically or anything like. It was so self-serious. I don't know if he thought he was delivering some kind of a message with this movie. The fashion industry has nasty people in it. What a revelation. Yeah. What? It was about 25 minutes worth of plot stretched out to over 2 hours.
Oh no.
Yeah. Man.
I'm sorry, man. The two I recommended and talked about, Silo and For All Mankind, are great.
I like
For All Mankind took me for a ride on that last episode in the last season so far.
I like to talk about
I had a great time. I'm sorry to hear you had that bad time.
Yeah, I like to talk about a bad movie every once in a while. I will say, on a technical level, this is an excellent movie for testing out if you are watching 24 frames per second in 24 frames per second, or if it's being converted to 60 and you're seeing judder, because there are oodles of slow tracking or panning shots.
That'll show it.
Which are at just the right speed, where if there is judder, it is going to be the judderiest of all judder that you could possibly see.
I'm judder sensitive, so I will see that right away.
So this is a good test for that. I would have it playing silently on a TV for testing purposes, because if you're gonna spot judder, you're gonna spot it in this movie. So I will give it that much. I guess I can move on from it. It's just,
let's go.
It did impact me in some way, just because I was like, man, that was bad.
So The Neon Demon, if you want to test your movie patience.
Yeah.
If you want to better appreciate when movies are good.
Yeah. Man, the dialogue is bad. Oh. Anyway.
So, listeners of the week.
Yes. And you know what? My voice could use a rest, so why don't I let you do it for once?
Well, sure. We'll talk about that. By the way, on Patreon, there's 133 patrons, and that's the same as the last episode, so that's a good sign. Yep. People aren't dropping off.
Yeah, it is. Want to support us on patreon.com/AVRant podcast for the full address if you want to type that in and sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So big thank you to everybody who does that for the financial support.
Right. So Aaron is a listener of the week. Another set of Canadian movie codes for Rob to test out. So Aaron is doing this for you, Rob.
Yes, that's right. Thank you very much, Aaron. They've all worked so far except for two. Two of them have not worked. One actually obeyed the expiry date, which almost none of them do. And then one of them just gave an error and never worked.
Yeah. Okay. All right. But still, Jay has given us permission to use his photos, so he's a listener of the week. Mm-hmm. And notes of gratitude coming in from people to keep the podcast going are because we keep the podcast going, we get the notes of gratitude. Mm. So Jay has sent a note of gratitude. Aaron, Sasi, is that how we say the name?
I believe so. Yeah, we've got the pronunciation down there at the bottom in quotation. Sasi. So it's something close to that. I don't think we've ever gotten it exactly right, but we aren't a mile away.
He heard us wondering how to pronounce his name properly. Apparently we got it right a couple of times, and he says, don't worry, he's never offended and generally doesn't care, so just say whatever is easiest for us. It's something close to Sasi. Sasi. Tell us exactly. I tell you what, Sasi, record yourself saying your name.
There it is.
And send us that audio, and we'll be more than happy to say it right.
How good we are at mimicking.
I want to say people's names right.
I
find it important. Gurinder is also a listener of the week. Thinks Tom ought to go whole hog and bust out the straight blade razor for his new hairstyle. Or, since he's also into power tools, he should convince DeWalt to make some 20-volt hair clippers. I don't know about a 20
that works across all devices.
Yeah, that does not sound safe. Stan is a listener of the week. Also, Jeff, he liked our advice when we said that an Epson 5050 UB projector honestly is worth it over less expensive projectors. He only wanted to purchase from Best Buy, so he waited for a sale and snapped one up when the price went down again recently. So that sounds like a great idea. And also, Greg is a listener of the week and sent us a note of gratitude. So there you go. There's our listeners of the week.
That is right. And as is tradition, I'll say the names one more time. Jay, Aaron, Sasi, Gurinder, Stan, Jeff, and Greg. Thank you all very much for your notes of gratitude and encouragement. They're certainly appreciated. And a big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions. And once again, we'll just mention it. question@avrant.com is the place where you can send those questions or comments or whatever else you want to do. question@avrant.com is the email address. And that is the best way to reach us. So, why don't we head on into the news this week? And,
let's do that. No surprise, SVS is running a closeout sale on their Ultra Series speakers ahead of the introduction of the new Ultra Evolution series in March. They often have very good sales. Always go look at that website. Mm-hmm. Ultra Bookshelf goes from 600 each to 400 each. That's a big drop. Ultra Tower goes from 1,300 to 1,000 each. That's a big drop. Ultra Center goes from 800 to 700 each. Ultra Surround goes from 600 to 400 each. Those are big deals, I think. You'll find the same discounted prices both on SVS's website and from their official resellers. It's while supplies last. Also in the news, yes, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, that is it's the end of the original Ultra series. This is Closeout. It's not just a sale. The Ultra Evolution series was announced coming in March, and that is replacing the Ultra series entirely. The price points on Ultra Evolution are higher across the board than the original prices of the Ultra series. So this represents an extra savings, right? If you're comparing these closeout prices on Ultra series versus what the Ultra Evolution is going to cost when it comes into the lineup, then even a bigger savings there. So other thing I will mention, they didn't say this specifically, but I mean, we've known SVS, they've honored this for ages and ages, which is, if you have purchased these same products just prior to the sale, absolutely give them a call. I don't know. I can't promise on their behalf that they're going to retroactively give you the sale price. But I would say I'd be a little bit surprised if they don't do something for you as a customer. If they're not doing what they did in the past, it was if you bought a product and it was actually like within a year if they dropped the price, because they never did sales before.
Right.
So they used to have a thing where if within a year they dropped the price, they would just refund you the difference. This being Closeout, probably a bit of a different deal, right? It's not like they're just running a standard sale, but something like maybe SVS store credit, that type of thing. I'd be a little surprised if they don't try to do something for you. If you like a month ago bought some Ultra Series speakers and they're like, wait a second, nobody told me there was going to be a sale if I just waited a month, that type of thing. So give them a call. It certainly can't hurt anything to
no, it wouldn't hurt at all.
Yeah,
my one interaction with them for customer service when I thought my subwoofers were electrocuted. They were super nice.
Yeah.
Just super nice. So, news about Plex. Mm-hmm. Plex is gearing up to launch their own movies and TV online store for buying and renting shows. Buying stuff for Plex, huh?
Yes.
It's supposed to launch in February with most major studios on board and quote unquote plans to complete the catalog soon after. Naturally, anything bought or rented via Plex Movies and TV Store will integrate seamlessly into your Plex library and watch list, which you have filled up with things you have downloaded. So, moving on from there.
Oh, well, I'll just make a comment about that.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's kind of interesting because Well, I mean, first of all, of course, when Plex started and they didn't really have any of their own content when they very first started, it was all about managing your own content. And yes, it very much was popular amongst piracy enthusiasts and that. People who weren't necessarily just using it for their own content they made themselves, or even legally backed up content, because that does exist, especially outside of the United States, where there aren't quite as many laws about, having copies of content that you already own and legally have yourself. You're allowed to have backups of those things. Right. But of course, stuff that's been downloaded and whatnot, and was definitely piracy. People are using Plex for those purposes too. So I mean,
I wouldn't know about that. That is weird. I've never heard of that.
Before, the way that they were making money was they didn't really do much in the way of advertising being thrown at you. So it was the Plex Pass, a thing that to unlock more advanced features, you would pay them a fee. They had lifetime subscriptions at one point, which turned out to be a pretty good deal. So that was the way that they were doing it. But of course, they've been looking for ways to increase revenue, find new revenue streams, all those types of things. They've been quite successful at having their own ad-supported content. So similar to a service like Tubi, for example, or Amazon's Freevee, those types of ad-supported over-the-top services where they have a collection of predominantly much older content, stuff that isn't super high in demand anymore, but the studios are absolutely willing to, give access to that for a reasonable fee to these smaller companies. And then they just run ads during those things. There are commercial breaks and they make money that way. Plex has been getting into live TV distribution as well, again ad supported, but this will be their first time where it's like, they just have a library, like if you go to the iTunes store or if you go to Google Play Store or Vudu or something like that, and piece by piece, one at a time, you can buy. I put in very much in quotation marks because of course if the license expires, that can disappear without any warning, without any refund. But yes, long-term lease or rent content for a one-time fee. They're getting into that. So this sort of brings up the whole question of, okay, the content quality is not going to rival what Kaleidoscape does. We can be very certain of that because Kaleidoscape, they get the mezzanine files directly from the studios and they actually do their own encoding, which is why the encoding on Kaleidoscape is often a larger file in total than what you would get on the Ultra HD Blu-ray. So it's not that they're even getting the Ultra HD Blu-ray version and then just making that available online. They're doing their own encoding over at Kaleidoscape. That is not going to be the case with Plex. I mean, they haven't said so, but I would be shocked beyond disbelief. There's no way. They're getting files.
Let's all admit what they're doing. They're looking for legitimacy.
They're looking for legitimacy, very much so. Doing. But it is interesting that you're going to have an interface like Plex's, which, like Kaleidoscape, in terms of bringing in, like aggregating all of your content from all of your various sources, it isn't really a champion at that. Kaleidoscape is about Kaleidoscape. This is now giving you a way of having like a movie and TV show library that you long-term lease or rent, in addition to ad-supported stuff that is coming from Plex itself, in addition to your own content that you have stored on local storage and that. It's like, being able to aggregate that all together and then combined with their search capabilities, which go out and tell you, okay, if it's not in anywhere in your Plex library, here's where it is available to stream. They're trying to be that, like, Plex, they want Plex to be the first app that you open, right? You go to your smart TV or you go to your streaming box and they want to be the first app that you open because whatever you want to get to, you can get to from Plex. That's their goal. And I'm like, that's not a bad move.
No, it's not.
I think
I just wonder if the studios won't require Plex to do something to hunt down, find, block,
and that has always been the fear. That has definitely been the fear that the more chummy they get with the studios, the more we're going to run into, they're going to start sharing Plex user data with the studios, that type of thing, which, I mean,
100%.
To their credit, they have always explicitly said they are not doing that. They and that is not unclear language or anything like that. So, I mean, if it turns out that they're doing it, that's a class action lawsuit right there.
I just don't see how you make the pivot from a history of the pirates' organizational software to legitimacy. I don't think anyone's done that before. Like way back in the day, even Napster tried to do that and failed miserably. I don't see how it's going to work, but okay.
I mean, we've said them a bunch now. Kaleidoscape is kind of that because originally...
But they weren't notorious.
No,
like
because they were always so
Plex.
expensive. But way back in the day, they were your own local storage. They had methods for ripping your own DVDs and then eventually Blu-rays. They did the whole thing where they tried to turn that system legitimate by forcing you to use a gigantic disc carousel, which didn't actually play the content off the disc. It still played it off the hard drive, but it just verified that you physically had the disc. They tried all sorts of things, and now they've just completely transitioned to being their own online store.
They weren't notorious enough.
No,
the studios didn't mind doing business. I don't think. Well, I'll be interested to see.
Kaleidoscape went out of business for a while. It was enough that the studios came after them. Yeah. So.
All right. But it just wasn't, it just wasn't on the tip of everyone's tongue. A lot of people know what Plex is.
The price all along has kept Kaleidoscape from being truly mainstream.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, we'll see what becomes
I'm
Plex
going to be curious,
this, You know, I mean, the thing is, if Plex as a company is to survive, they do eventually have to become legitimate. Like there is no path forward just continuing, with very low revenue and just being the dream of pirates.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's BitTorrent has existed all this time and continues to exist and continues to get updated, but it's never going to turn into a major retail piece of software.
It's never given you a particularly nice, organizational viewing experience on your television.
Nope, not at all. Let's move on to another bit of news about Netflix. Netflix, which is a big major name of legitimacy, has been angling to get in on live TV streaming, with analysts expecting them to target a major sports league. Well, now they've inked a $5 billion deal, and the word sports is in there, but as part of the phrase sports entertainment. The deal is with WWE Professional Wrestling. I'm sorry if some of you like that and you hear the disdain in my voice. I'm sorry.
I don't have disdain.
I just find it so eye-rolling. But if you like it, to me, it's like reality TV. I don't like that either.
It's 100% a soap opera. That's what WWE
it's fine. I just, I don't know. Starting in January 2025, WWE Monday Night Raw will air exclusively live on Netflix, ending their long run on NBC Universal's USA network. How about that? And outside of the United States, the deal's even bigger. In Canada, the UK, Latin America, and other territories, all of WWE's live TV shows, including Raw, SmackDown, and NXT, will air live exclusively on Netflix. And WWE's premium live events, formerly known as pay-per-views, will also be available on Netflix outside the USA. In the U.S., SmackDown will end its run on Fox in October and move to USA Network for 5 years. NXT will end its run on USA Network and move to the CW. The streaming catalog and premium live events will remain on Peacock.
Yes.
So subscribe to everything. The agreement between WWE and Netflix is for 10 years, but Netflix has the option to end the arrangement after just 5, or they can extend it for an additional 10 years. The deal pays WWE approximately 33% more than they were paid by the USA Network, so it's obvious why they're doing that.
Yes.
It makes sense to me. That actually sounds right.
I mean, honestly, all around business-wise, this makes a whole lot of sense.
Of course
because,
it does. Sure.
The thing is, for Netflix's purposes, if they want to get into a highly dependable, highly predictable, highly subscriber, enticing program, it's like WWE has been making their live television 52 weeks a year. They never take a week off, even if it falls on Christmas, they have an episode.
Wow.
They are as dependable as live TV gets, to be honest. There is no break, right? There's no seasons in WWE. It's just there all the time. So if you want people to have a reason to subscribe month after month after month, that makes a whole lot of sense. Netflix isn't actually paying the cost of making the as in they're not having to create their own studio to do this or hire their own production team. It's still WWE's production team. They're footing the bill at this point, but everything is in place. It's like turnkey solution for Netflix. And
it's just a paper deal.
And a super predictable, like the viewing audience for WWE has been really, really steady in the past number of years. Like they had their huge time during the Attitude Era when it was, The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, and they had those huge stars, and that was like the biggest it ever got. It's come way down since then. It's not 20 million viewers anymore. It's like 1.2, but they've been steady at that for ages and ages. So it's like, if you want predictability, dependability, and those types of things, which is what Netflix is after, but you want to say we're doing live now and get the reps in, get the practice in doing that to expand to other live things, and then it seems like a good business sense deal all around,
and it's a very loyal audience. I have met people that are into it, and my first reaction is always, really? And you don't realize how many people know so much about this.
I'm not sure how many WWE fans would not have been Netflix subscribers, like how much this is going to grow Netflix's subscriber base, but I could envision a number of people who are WWE diehard fans and subscribe to Netflix, but not literally every single month forever and ever. Yeah. And this would be all it would take, right? It's like, if this is the only place where I can watch Raw live on Monday nights, I'm going to keep my Netflix subscription the entire year.
This might make a lot of people happy. There might be people who are keeping cable television for this. And then finally they can get away from it.
And honestly, here in Canada, where they still had the separate WWE network, which was like their own streaming service, and that was the way to watch the monthly pay-per-view events, the premium live events, as they're calling them now. This is actually a better deal than that. Like, especially if you were already subscribed to Netflix, and now you're not having to pay for an additional service to watch the monthly pay-per-views. Like, it's a better deal.
All right.
So, it's like, I don't know.
Different strokes for different folks.
And look, if you already subscribe to Netflix and you have no interest in WWE professional wrestling, nobody's forcing you to watch it. Just click away. So, I don't really see a downside in any way for anybody. And this seems like a win-win all around. So, congrats to them. Seems like everybody's happy with this deal.
All right. Well, there you go. Why don't we actually do some question answering?
Let's shall. Supposedly, that's what this podcast is about.
So after however long we've been talking, let's go to last week's questions. So the first one coming up for our question time here is from the aforementioned Sasi. And again, hope I'm saying that right. Sasi invested in a flagship Denon A1H receiver a few months ago. As we know, it comes with Odyssey Multi-EQ XT32 built in, but there's the option to pay hundreds of dollars to add Dirac. And now that Dirac live bass control is available, you can pay $800 for the bundle to get full bandwidth and multi-sub. Sasi never really doubted our claims that as long as you use the same target curve, Odyssey is just as capable, and therefore Dirac is kind of overhyped these days and not worth paying hundreds of dollars extra. But there is so much hype and some really big claims about Dirac being significantly better and totally worth the money. There's always going to be claims. So when Dirac was offering their Denon add-ons for 20% off, he decided to go for it to experiment with it himself. Cool. He didn't mind spending the money, and it was fun. He thoroughly tweaked both Odyssey and Dirac with bass control multi-sub to his liking, and surprise, surprise, they pretty much sounded the same. Certainly no $800 difference. Furthermore, they pretty much sounded the same at reference volume, but with the volume turned down to where he normally has it, the lack of Odyssey dynamic EQ really did become apparent. End result, he's going back to Odyssey. But he is part of a local home theater meetup group. It includes members who swear by Dirac or Anthem's ARC Genesis being so much better than Odyssey. He'd like to let them hear a blind comparison. His Denon A1H offers its 2 speaker preset memory settings, so one of them can have the Odyssey setup and the other can have Dirac. That should make switching between them easier, if not instantaneous, since there are a few button presses and a turning off the sound, turning the sound back on involved. But what other recommendations do we have for him in terms of matching variables so that it's a fair blind comparison? Obviously, he'd want to make sure they are level matched, and he would use the same target curve. Anything else? I think he's on the right track. Could he make it double blind and turn around and not know what he's picking?
That would be somebody's got to do the switching. Yeah. This is, I fear, like this is a case where I think the theory is actually simpler than the practical execution.
Okay.
That's how I would describe this. Because yes, everything that you said there is definitely on the right track. Like, you want to make sure that you can switch between them as easily as possible. Now, certainly the easiest way is that, speaker preset 1 is going to be your Odyssey calibration. Speaker preset 2 inside the Denon is going to be your Dirac calibration, and you are absolutely able to do that. Within the Dirac calibration, you are able to store 3 different targets. So you could actually have a total of 4 different things to compare, although you would have to switch between Dirac targets and then also switch back to Odyssey.
That sounds like a mess.
Yeah, there's a lot of switching going on, and I wouldn't. That isn't really the purpose of this. The purpose of this would be to create 2 identical target curves, one of them using the Odyssey system, one of them using the Dirac system, and then just switch between those 2 things and saying, okay, this is one program's version of targeting that curve, and here's the other program's version of targeting that curve. Naturally, if you use the default curves, which are different, if you heard differences there, that would easily be the explanation. But we're saying, okay, just in the intrinsic qualities of these systems, what are they capable of doing? If we tell them to both target the same thing, how different do they sound? Because the people who are claiming that Dirac and Anthem Arc Genesis are intrinsically better than Odyssey, regardless of what target curves you're using, that's the demonstration that he's trying to change their attitude towards that conclusion. But yes, if we're going to do that, those are the first steps. We're A-okay there, and nothing beyond having the skill to create those same target curves in both different programs. They are a little bit different, but that's something I'm certain he can get around. The volume matching is significantly trickier. So with Odyssey system, one of the reasons I like it is that regardless of where you have the master volume set before you begin Odyssey, it is going to ignore that. It is going to take its readings directly from the fact that the Odyssey microphone is plugged straight into the Denon receiver, and all of the process is handled inside of the Denon receiver, other than, of course, to create your own target curve, you'll be using either the Odyssey editor app or the PC Mult-EQ-X software. You'll be using those to manually create your target curve, but all of the actual measuring, all of the signal from the microphone to the receiver, and all of the calculations and everything are done inside the AV receiver. And so it does a very good job of saying, okay, we want it so that when the master volume at the end of this process is set to 0 dB on that relative scale, then it will match reference volume, cinema reference volume, which is targeting 85 decibel average across a movie, 105 decibel peaks in individual speaker channels, and it does a very good job of hitting that cinema reference volume with that. Dirac is considerably more up to you as to where that master volume dial ends up correlating to the actual output volume. And the reason for that is they can't really be certain what the microphone is feeding the device that's doing all the calculations, which is your computer. They can recommend that you use a mini DSP branded UMic 1 and that you just plug that into the USB port of your computer and don't touch anything. But, you could easily adjust the gain of that microphone in Windows. You could adjust the gain of that microphone in Dirac software. And in fact, sometimes they'll say it might be necessary to adjust the gain of the USB microphone. Then you can individually change where the master volume is set in the software before the measurements even begin. And you can change the gain level of each speaker channel individually. And you do all of that manually.
Right.
It will
so
then,
that's going to be tough to get an accurate measurement to really get them both the same volume.
That's the issue.
About the only way is just for him to do it till it sounds the same.
Well, I mean, it sounds the same isn't good enough. It would have to be.
But
it would have to be measured, and some people would argue that even measured with an SPL meter, isn't good enough. They would,
No, it's
you know,
not
go
gonna
to
be
the extent of measuring electrically at the speaker, which is probably beyond, I mean, it's beyond my capabilities. It's not something
Right.
that I would do. So, I mean, I would rely on volume matching via an SPL meter, which is, you know, at least approximate, but what I'm getting at is it's a bunch of trial and error. It's a
Right,
whole bunch of
yeah.
trial and error. And I mean, some people would say, okay, because like Dirac will level match all of the channels. It does that. But it doesn't necessarily level match all of them to cinema reference volume at 0 dB on the master volume dial, right? Like
Right.
some people like that because they want to set their own reference volume. They're like, here's what I consider reference volume on the master volume dial, and that's where I want to set things, and I want my master volume to be what I prefer or whatever it is. Like some people really like that. It's like super tweakable, but
Right.
it doesn't give you a reliable baseline for what it's actually going to be. And then some people would say, okay, we'll just run Odyssey, run Dirac, and then you can just do the level matching via the master volume dial. Like you're going to switch between speaker preset 1 and speaker preset 2 to switch between Odyssey and Dirac. And beforehand, you just have to figure out, okay, where do the master volumes need to be set to have them at least be equal on your sound pressure level meter, on your SPL meter. And I'm like, that's certainly better than nothing, but if we're talking about a scientific and a blind comparison, it's not enough. It's not accurate enough.
So you're talking about adjusting a master level in settings, or literally adjusting the volume for the receiver?
Just adjusting the volume during the comparison.
And also that's going to make it take forever too to get it exactly.
That's right. Yeah.
That's too slow to pop between two things you're listening to.
So I'm saying that it's not impossible to do, and your theory is exactly right. All the things you mentioned, and there isn't a terrible amount beyond that, other than you want to try and keep the actual listing panel blind. You need to take into account, like if there's multiple people, then you want to be able to have them rotate around the various seating positions, because certain
one
seats
at a time in the middle.
going to demonstrate things, more than others. You need to take into account listener fatigue and outside variables and all these types of things. It's blind comparisons are a arduous and tiring process to put yourself through. But on top of all that, the practical application of everything that you talked about on the setup side is going to be more tedious and more repetitions than I think you might have envisioned originally.
Yeah,
just because
at the very least, he needs something that measures sound pressure level.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
To get those two overall levels as close as possible.
Yeah.
And if he feels like doing it, it would be kind of fun. I think you could get it close enough where most people wouldn't even.
But it's just
tell
that
the difference.
you can sway subjective preference results so easily.
Oh yeah.
Just by making one of them a little bit louder than the
That's
other.
right. Yeah.
That's kind of all it takes, and particularly in the bass. If you make one a little bit louder than the other, usually people end up preferring that. And so it's a very fuzzy thing. It's going to be a lot of repetition. It might be more trouble than it's worth, but that's the question he was asking. That's the warning I want to give. And I will say it's kind of doable. Just be prepared for a lot of trial and error.
I will be curious to hear the results.
Yeah.
First, the results of how he set it up, and then the results of what people thought of what he set up. That will be interesting. He goes on. He has been planning to install a projection setup. He wants a 135-inch screen, and he was planning to get a white silver ticket screen along with an Epson LS12000 laser projector. He is used to OLED performance, but he fully understands the image quality differences in using a projector instead. Good. But then he came across Epson's L775U large venue projector. It appears to largely use the same technology as the LS12000 laser light engine, 1080p LCD panels that are wobbled 4 times per frame to create 4K resolution output. But it claims to be able to output up to 7,000 lumens instead of only 2,700 lumens like the LS12000. Good Lord. If he were to go that route and use an ambient light rejecting screen instead of just a white screen, could he actually use a projector with the lights on? He's not going to be able to see straight after this. Well, do you want to answer that question first? Could he actually use a projector with the lights?
Let's go through the whole question and we'll answer it all at once. Yeah.
if we would still favor the LS12000, why? What is better about the LS12000 versus the large venue L775U model? And is there an ambient light rejecting screen we would recommend for a projection setup in either case? I'm sure the answer to that is yes. I am curious to hear Rob answer what the trade-offs are. Almost always brighter means some other trade-off.
Yeah,
some other accuracy trade-off.
And here it's fairly obvious. You know, the L775U, it absolutely has its applications, right? Yeah, like they market it as large venue. It's like, you know, for school auditoriums, for churches, that type of thing. Absolutely appropriate for that. But yeah, the black levels on it don't touch the LS12000. So when you do have the lights off, you're going to have considerably gray looking blacks if you went for that L775U. Even with a, you know, dark tinted ambient light rejecting screen, there's just really no comparison in terms of black level and particularly that shadow detail, right, just above black. If you want to maintain that movie-like quality, then the LS12000 absolutely comes out leaps and bounds ahead. It is also considerably more capable in terms of wide color and just general color accuracy. If you wanted to tame the L775U down to Rec 709 for standard dynamic range content, it's not going to be outputting 7,000 lumens at that point. You're going to have to do quite a bit of tailoring to make the white balance much more red because it's by its natural inclination much more blue, much colder color temperature. And then, yeah, you know, in terms of getting, you know, something close to that full, DCI color, the P3 color for HDR content, then the L775 you just really can't do that. That's something the LS12000 can. So in terms of being a movie projector at home, the LS12000 is certainly the better choice there. Much better black level. That's the main thing. Black levels and contrast.
It's made for that situation. There's a reason it has the features it has.
Yeah. But color too. Color is not insignificant. If you want accurate color and full P3 color, then LS12000 is going to be able to get you there much better. So 2700 lumens, it is a bright projector. 135-inch screen is not so large that you're exceeding the capabilities of that LS12000. That's actually a really nice match, that 135-inch screen size going with that projector. He's just thinking, okay, if I turn the lights on, you know, obviously the image is going to wash out somewhat and brighter might make it a bit more visible. It's really all about the screen at that point. You know, if you max out the light output capabilities of an LS12000 and you have the best screen possible for a lights on viewing scenario, it's going to be watchable. It's never going to be great. No projector is ever going to be great with the lights on. You know, even the ultra short throw projectors with the very best, you know, ceiling light rejection screens, the sawtooth screens that only work with ultra short throw, you know, are they viewable? Like, can you watch a football game with the lights on? Yeah, you can. You can see the players, you can see the field. That's okay. But I wouldn't watch a dark show, you know, I wouldn't watch Silo on an ultra short throw projector
definitely not Silo.
With the lights on, and I wouldn't do that even with the L775U and an ambient light rejecting screen. I wouldn't watch content like Silo because you don't have the black levels and the contrast. Those are just gone. So can you do it with some dim ambient lighting, some indirect ambient lighting, i.e. not a pitch black bat cave of a room? Can you get a pretty decent viewing experience that way? Yeah, that you can get pretty decent. It's still not going to be ideal. Ideal is going to be pitch black for any projector, but you can get a fairly decent in low ambient lighting, you know, full sunlight coming in, forget about it. No projector is going to be able to deal with that regardless of the screen. So I do have a couple of ambient light rejecting screens that I like to recommend most highly. They're pretty similar in price point, and I have one that I favor a little bit more, but it has a bit of a caveat to it, and that is Seymour AV's Matinee Black. Now, the original Matinee Black, they could only make it up to a certain screen size. So it doesn't actually get to the screen size that you wanted in that original Matinee Black. Original Matinee Black also had a serious drawback. which was that it had very narrow viewing angles. One of the ways that they made it so good at rejecting light from every direction is that it really only put out a narrow cone of reflected light. And so it was...
Well, that rejects.
That rejects. It was pretty strict on where you could place your projector, and then pretty strict on where you could sit in front of it. Quite effective, but pretty rigid in terms of setup and where you could sit. They created a bit more of a relaxed version that is called Matinee Black Wide, and that they can make into the larger screen sizes, including the screen size you want. And with Seymour AV's precision screen frame, that's the less expensive of their screen frame options. It's $1,800 to get the this is 137.7 because they go by integer widths instead of going by diagonals. But it's 137.7, which is the closest, and $1,800 for their less expensive screen frame with the Matinee Black Wide. And that is probably my favorite one to recommend for a standard throw projector like the Epson LS12000. That's the one that I would want to go with. There are considerably more expensive ambient light rejecting screens out there. Some of them very good. Screen Innovations ambient light rejecting screens are very good. They're also at least twice the price, typically more like 3 times that price. And I don't think they are 2 to 3 times better. Seymour AV's Matinee Black Wide is a very impressive ambient light rejecting screen. It's my favorite one to recommend. Elite Screens does have their Cinegray 5D, funny name, but yeah, Cinegray 5D, available in a 135-inch screen size with their Aeon frame, which is a very, very narrow bezel frame, almost borderless frame. But they sell that for $1,700. It's only $100 less. And I personally think that the Seymour Matinee Black Wide is a little bit better. The Cinegray 5D from Elite, I can see a little bit more shimmer, like if an image is moving across the screen. One of the things with ambient light rejecting screens, because they're using these like angled reflective surfaces all over the screen, you can get a shimmer on it. You're going to get a bit of that with the Matinee Black Wide as well. It's not free of all screen grain or shimmer or anything like that. It's not a completely, looks just like a white screen in a black room type of scenario. But I think it's a little bit better than the Cinegray 5D. It's only $100 more. So yeah, that's what's out there. There are less expensive, there are more expensive, but those are the two that I feel sort of hit that value where the good performance, not crazy expensive, and worth the price that they're charging. But that's just one man's opinion. Yeah, Projector Central did a thorough investigation, but it's a few years old now. There's some of the more popular ones that they don't have on that list that have come out since they did that comparison, but I'll link up that comparison too, just because it's good reading to get better information on what's important to look for in an ambient light rejecting screen.
Has Sasi explained why he's concerned about ambient light? I'm curious of his arrangement, his physical setup, and what.
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's just a not everybody wants to always watch everything in the pitch black. That makes sense. That's the fun of a projector. It feels like to me, but I got you. He continues. He has seen several projection setups showing HDR. None have ever matched up with the image from his OLED. No. That is to be expected. That's another reason he was interested in the much higher light output from the L775U, even though that projector doesn't even accept HDR signals. And then we've covered that. But how do you go about getting the best HDR performance from a projection setup? He's heard people talk about using Panasonic's Ultra HD Blu-ray players for their tone mapping, but he uses MKV backups. Mm-hmm. People also talk about adding an HD Fury device or using a Zedo media player, but do those really make a significant difference? He knows the Lumigen and Mad VR processors are out there, but he really, really has no intention of spending that much. So what's the solution for making HDR look as good as possible on a projector? Convert it to SDR. No, well, I suppose
there's a way to get more out of that.
I mean, the best way is with good frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping, which is what the Lumigen or the Mad VR add to projectors that don't have it, or you get like a JVC that comes with it built in. And if you're looking at, an LS12000, then something like the NP5 is not out of the question as an option. That is something that could potentially be within striking distance price-wise for sure, and that would give you the frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping. HDR isn't just about getting the brightest image. It's about having that difference between
that contrast, yeah.
bright and dark. It's about having the change in dynamic range between the darkest thing and the brightest thing on screen at the same time. So once again, the LS12000 is actually going to be better at preserving that detail than the brighter L775U. It's just the L775U. The black level is so much higher that you don't actually have that much more contrast on the screen at the same time. It's not just about pure brightness. So, like in the case of the Panasonic Ultra HD Blu-ray players, what they are doing is pre-tone mapping ahead of the signal reaching your projector. So if it's something that was mastered to 2000 nits or 4000 nits, it's going to pre-tone map down into the range of your projector's capability so that your projector doesn't have to try and do as much tone mapping. You're relying on Panasonic's tone mapping instead of your projector's tone mapping.
Does Panasonic have like levels, like where you could say my projector's capable of this much?
You can adjust it beforehand a little bit there, and it gives you a slider to do some adjustments. But the Panasonic gives you its own 16-step slider when you're watching HDR to do that adjustment there. So I don't really think in the case of matching a Panasonic with an Epson that you're really doing. You might be changing where you make the settings adjustment, either in the player or the projector, but you're not really changing the end effect. When you're talking about what like the Zidu Media Player is doing, I'm not familiar enough with it to be like an authoritative source on that, but as far as I know, they've basically got some of their own like dynamic algorithm tone mapping that's going on in there. So it's not quite the same as frame by frame. It's a little bit closer to like dynamic contrast that we're used to. Not dissimilar from what Sony does in their projectors, where again, they are tone mapping it, but they're not doing like a linear tone map. They're kind of like goosing the highs and lowering the lows to give you that more contrasty light type of look. As far as I'm aware, it's a similar approach to that. So subjectively, that might give you the sense that brights are brighter and darks are darker. But if you're actually more about detail, sometimes that detail gets clipped off because the darker parts are all pushed darker and closer together, and you lose some of the shadow detail, and the brights are pushed together and you lose some of the highlight detail. So it's not really my favorite approach. HD Fury's devices, what they're doing is allowing you to show Dolby Vision content on a projector that doesn't natively support Dolby Vision. That's the big thing that the HD Fury devices do. So they're doing their own conversion of Dolby Vision, which is, scene by scene, and they're converting that into a HDR10 container. So that your projector can understand it. It works pretty well for preserving detail where Dolby Vision is really doing that, where it really is changing the metadata on certain scenes to preserve more highlight detail, and it does a good job of that, of converting that to HDR10 that your projector can understand. So there's value there, but of course not all content is in Dolby Vision. So for stuff that isn't in Dolby Vision, it isn't doing a ton there. So my favorite approach for how to make HDR look best on a projector is to have that frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping. So given where you are price point-wise, my honest advice would be consider, it is a little bit more money, but they're actually like having sales these days on JVC's projectors. I would strongly consider going with an NP5, because in my opinion, that's how you get the best-looking HDR image without, going nuts on the price.
Yeah, it definitely just sounds instinctively to me like you want a projector doing that determination, that
on the fly.
The projector knows itself.
Yeah.
It knows it's bright as possible. It knows it's dark as possible. So yeah, NP5 sounds like a thing to go for if you can. All right. Shall we move on to Jay?
Let's shall.
Jay has the following questions. Rob weighed in on the 1 out of 3 Outlaw Audio Model 2200 monoblock amp in his setup that is producing a constant low-level buzz no matter which pre-out electrical outlet or speaker it is plugged into. Rob talked about how he once heard a very similar buzz from his own ATI amplifier and how ATI insisted on repairing it, and later said that one of the 2 toroidal transformers had become dislodged at some point. So Rob said it would be worth sending it back to Outlaw, even though it would be cross-border shipping from Canada in Jay's case, but Jay was still hoping to somehow find a less costly solution. Long story short, he was reading about how cable TV hookups often cause all kinds of mysterious hums and buzzes. He doesn't have any physical cable TV connection running to his home theater system, but the idea did lead him to try unplugging his video components, including his Epson 5050 UB projector's HDMI connection at one point. Voila! The buzz completely disappeared. Wow. Plug that HDMI cable back in, buzz comes back.
Mm-hmm.
And the Epson is being powered by a separate 20 amp circuit that was wired specifically for the theater. So he tried running a long extension cable from the projector to a regular 15 amp outlet in another room. The buzz was much reduced, but still present. So bottom line, there is still something strange here because his other two Outlaw monoblocks do not produce any buzz no matter what. It's just that one monoblock. But it is somehow tied to the electrical connection between the AV receiver's pre-out and his Epson projector. Given all of that, he figures he'll still need a repair done by Outlaw, but he can give them all of that information to maybe help diagnose what is going on. But now that we have that info, can we explain what's happening? And he found someone selling a used Outlaw monoblock amp for $350 Canadian. Should he take a chance on buying that and just forget about the cross-border shipping and repair? It reminds me of many years ago, I had a ground loop hum that I just had to defeat by taking out the ground plug. I just used a 3-to-2 plug converter and just decided to be dangerous, and the ground loop went away. Sometimes between two different circuits in your house, there is a difference in the electricity somehow that does this. I've seen it more than once.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, I obviously I can't diagnose it for sure, just given a description like that. And, I didn't know enough to repair my own ATI amp or anything like that. But honestly, it only makes me think even more that it's something to do with the power supply inside of that particular monoblock, because this sounds like maybe there's a grounding issue with that particular amp, because there's always noise on our electrical lines. There's piles of noise on our electrical lines, but if they're properly grounded, that noise gets shunted to ground and it doesn't enter into the performance of that piece of gear. If there's something wrong with the grounding of that particular monoblock they have, because the other two are working fine, right? So this isn't inherent to that model of amplifier or something like that. There's something wrong with that particular unit. And this makes me think even more it's something to do with the power supply. Something's not right there. And I do think Outlaw would be able to repair it. Now, cross-border shipping is not super cheap. You're probably looking at about $100 either way, plus the cost of the repair. You put all that together, and getting the used one for $350 is not out of the ballpark of what it's probably going to cost you to do the repair anyway. I think that's close, because there's time involved too, right? So if you can get that used amp right away and you can test it out and it works great, I'd be like, I would just do that, right?
I would do that. Maybe you could make a deal with that seller and say, I'll let you keep $20 or $30 if I want to give it back to you. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
If something is still wrong, which I doubt, I think this is going to solve the problem.
Yeah.
But maybe you could work a deal with them where you give them a few bucks to kind of rent it.
Oh yeah, and if you can haggle the price down to $300, I would just I would just do it, and if it works, I'd be done. I'd consider that done. I think that price is close enough for sure.
And then the next time you're driving to America, just take it with you and take it straight to them and forget the shipping. It'd be cheaper just to take a long drive, wouldn't it? Okay, so moving on with Jay's questions. Jay's theater is roughly 12.5 feet by 23 feet by 7.5 feet. For acoustical treatments, his plan was to make DIY panels with triangular traps in the corners, 4-inch thick panels on the back wall and on the side walls at the first reflection points, and then 2-inch thick panels along the rest of the side walls since he has narrow walkways. So far, he's done the first reflection point panels on the side walls, and he was just about ready to build some more. He includes pictures, by the way, that I'm sure we are using. But then he saw Anthony Gramani's presentation with Audioholics on his recipe for acoustical treatments, and it got him second-guessing himself and his original plan, as everything will. Mr. Gramani is a very well-respected expert in home theater design and installation, and his recipe includes quite a lot of diffusion panels in addition to bass traps and absorption panels. And furthermore, if there is an absorption panel on the left wall, then directly opposite on the right wall will be a diffusion panel, and he will alternate between absorption and diffusion all along the walls, with the opposite wall always having the other type of panel directly across the room from it. So, should Jay change up his plan? Should he be adding diffusion panels? And should they be alternating and opposite across the room the way Anthony Grimani describes? That sounds like too much trouble for the results you're going to get. That sounds like way too much trouble for the results you're going to get. I'd stick with your plan, man.
Yeah, I like your original plan. In fact, I wouldn't bother with the 2-inch panels. Certainly not prior to measuring. So I want to just approach this. So, I mean, not to try and stir up some kind of online disagreement with Anthony Grimani or anything like that. That's not my goal. But I just want to think through, what do diffusion panels and what do relatively thin absorption panels, what do they do? What do they actually do, right? And the answer in both cases is they weaken higher frequencies and don't do anything to the base. And in the case of even a thin, like a 1-inch thin absorption panel versus a diffusion panel, even a diffusion panel of a fairly deep thickness, the diffusion panel weakens high frequencies only, but not quite as much as, say, a 1-inch absorption panel. But diffusion panels weaken high frequencies. There seems to be this weird misconception that gets floated around a lot of forums and acoustic panel enthusiasts that somehow adding diffusion brings the life back to your room. Like, you've overdamped your room, so you don't take down any of the absorption that you put up, because you can't really ever overdo bass trapping. In a residential sized room, you can't, like, you could line every surface of the room that you have in 10-inch thick absorption panels and you would not harm the bass. You would harm the mid-range and the treble. It would be too dead. But you would not harm the bass. You can't really overdo the bass trapping.
But with 10-inch panels, you would have the padded cell that you need at that point for your mental state.
But you would have overdone it in the mid-range and treble. And there seems to be this weird feeling that without taking any of those 10-inch panels down, if you'd added diffusion to that room, somehow you would bring the life back. No, you wouldn't. There would be some slight greater amount of reflection only in a narrow band of the treble. In that sense, you've brought a little bit of treble back in the room, but diffusion still weakens the treble versus just having a reflective surface. And that reflective surface could just be your bare wall, or if what you have done is completely overdamped your room and you want to still have that amount of bass absorption but bring some reflection back into the room for the mid-range and treble, having a membrane bass trap, not a scatter plate bass trap, but a membrane bass trap that actually puts a flexible membrane in front of the absorption. That actually helps to absorb the bass even more, but then acts predominantly as a reflector for the mid-range and treble. That would be the type of panel that you would put in that completely padded,
what kind of material or what kind of substance would that be?
Oh, it's like a vinyl. It's
just a vinyl.
Okay. It's just a rubberized rubberized vinyl membrane. Right. Pretty simple stuff, but it works more or less as a reflector in the high frequencies. But
of course,
just resonates at sort of the right low frequencies given the right design to be even more absorptive at certain frequencies in the bass.
You could tune it like a drum head.
You can tune it. Yes.
Yeah. How about that?
Yeah.
All right.
So that would be the approach there. So what I would suggest to you is I don't think adding the 2-inch panels towards the back of your room on the side walls is even worth it, because all those are going to do is make the treble, it's going to knock down the treble. It's not going to help your bass at all because they're only 2 inches thick. And you're saying I can't make them any thicker because it impedes in walkways. We've got to live in the real world scenario, and I completely agree with you. I don't think they're really doing you a ton of benefits. So if you have the opportunity, treat your front wall a little bit more heavily, treat your back wall as heavily as you can. Those first reflection points you've already done. I love the corner bass traps. You're done. That's it. You don't need to do any more than that. You don't need to make just the treble and a really narrow portion of the treble weaker. If you If you do a clap test after you've treated the front wall, the back wall, and the first reflection points, you do a clap test, you just clap your hands and listen for a zing, and you hear a very obvious zing that's still in your room, which I guarantee you won't because your room is also fully carpeted. There's no chance that's happening.
You're not going to hear
room.
a zing in there.
But if you did for somebody else, or you measure and you look at the waterfall graph, and for some reason you have some really weird, like very uneven decay times only in the treble, which is super unlikely. But if it somehow happened, that's where diffusion comes into play. But diffusion treats a really narrow, specific issue. It can make sense in something like, I'm playing an instrument right next to a wall, and I don't want to affect the sound very much, but I'm getting this high frequency slap echo. Okay, diffusion.
Yeah.
Okay. Or you could just put a 1-inch thick panel there. Would also work just as well for that application. But okay, that's like where it could work. Also, I'm going to say that in the types of rooms that Anthony Gramani tends to be hired to make, it can make a little more sense in his rooms because he's designing nothing less than a $300,000 room. They are typically much, much larger and typically using his speakers, which are compression tweeter horn-loaded speakers that can be very bright and reflective if you are sitting in just the wrong spot. So if you have a diffusion panel right next to that spot, it can help in those specific frequencies, right? I'm not saying there's never an application, but it's a really narrow application where it makes sense, and it's not DIY in a room your size.
Just overall, this situation sounds like you're trying to solve a problem you don't have yet.
No, but I
your
get
plan
it. You
sounds
see an
so
expert
good.
who's saying this is what I recommend and this is what I do.
Sure.
So it's a little bit of fear. I get that.
I get it. But I would say his plan sounds so good. Go with it as is and live with it for a little while and see if there's anything else that needs to be done. But it sounds solid.
Yeah.
Sounds
but
really
nice.
nice.
I would, in fact, pare it back a little bit. You don't even need the 2-inch panels, in my opinion.
All right. Regarding his DIY panels, he viewed a bunch of videos online. That's always asking for trouble. With all kinds of instructions and designs for making your own panel frames. He is using 3-inch rock wool insulation with a 1-inch air gap, with basic lumber and Z-clips to hang them on the walls. Much of the materials were leftovers from the theater reno. That sounds amazing.
Excellent.
He can't quite understand why so many of the online instructions are quite elaborate or suggest using some pricey materials. Oh, I can understand why that happens. Some wood glue and a nail gun did the trick in his case. Yeah. And once they're wrapped in black fabric and hanging in a dark theater, do we really need to worry at all about how pretty they are underneath? No. Like, for real, is there anything wrong with building panels as cheaply as you can with the simplest frame design? No. One of his panel frames did end up a bit more complex, but only because he wanted to hang it directly over a light switch. So he had to create a cutout within the panel to allow access. That makes perfectly good sense. Yes. And of course, look, I'm being a little bit facetious, just laughing about it, but I'm a guy who has used bed comforters as sound absorption in a studio to record stuff for the radio. And so I swear, you get anywhere close to a good panel, it's fine. In most cases.
For performance characteristics, I mean, I will say, sometimes people are making panels to go in a room where it is not a darkened theater, and they will be looking at it all the time, or people will be standing close, guests will be standing close to it, something like that, and they want it to double as much as a visual piece of art as it works as a panel, or they just want to make sure that, like, if anybody's inspecting, what the frame looks like, that it's really going to be flawless looking. So, I mean, I'm not going to say that there's never... I'm not going to say there's never a reason to spend time and money on the frame. There absolutely could be. But I agree with you. In your case, you've gone to the extent of, I want this to be a darkened theater. As long as these are going to be black panels that don't look atrocious, they're just going to blend into the shadows, and that's exactly what you want. Make them cheap, make them easy, and there you go.
I'm a black rectangle fan.
There you go.
I would go for it just like that. So, continuing on. I have to scroll, pardon me, as I make it to the new questions for this week. And we'll see if how Rob holds up here, and we'll do as many
I'm feeling a little bit down, but I'm going to power through.
Man, you really sound pretty good for somebody who's been that sick.
Good.
So good for you. New questions for this week. Eric is our first new question for this week. As reported over at Tech Radar, Disney Plus is still intent on adding DTS:X audio as an option to its selection of IMAX enhanced streaming titles. We had heard about IMAX DTS audio coming to Disney Plus way back when IMAX enhanced support was first announced, but now they have demonstrated it in action and say it should launch via Sony and Hisense IMAX enhanced TVs this summer. The writer over at Tech Radar wound up with the headline, "I streamed Disney Plus movies with DTS:X sound, and now I know why IMAX enhanced matters."
Now, see, I'm not going to even attribute that to the writer necessarily, because sometimes editors change headlines on writers, so I'm not going to blame anybody for that one.
But the headline
that is the headline that was on the article,
implying that the DTS:X sound is everything.
Yeah, if you read that, wouldn't that be what you would infer from that headline? Yeah,
that's exactly what it sounds like. But headlines get weird compared to articles. In the article, there are mentions of very powerful bass, excellent separation, and that the audio was notably dynamic, but there aren't any head-to-head comparisons with the currently available Dolby Atmos soundtracks, and it was just a reaction to Disney's demo system using a Sony OLED, Sony receiver, and DefTech speakers, all IMAX enhanced certified products, of course. So, that's all well and good, but do we think this IMAX enhanced DTS:X audio option will actually make a big difference when we get to hear it for ourselves? I'm Captain Skeptical, so I don't think it's going to make a big difference.
So, I mean, what we can say is there is no technical inherent reason why DTS:X ever has to sound different from a Dolby version.
Right.
They are both formats are completely capable of sounding exactly the same.
Right.
What I will say is, would it surprise me one iota if the IMAX enhanced movies that are available on Disney Plus, when you play them back in the DTS:X soundtrack option instead of the Dolby Atmos soundtrack option, if the bass is goosed in the DTS:X version, if the overhead height effects are goosed, like 10 decibels louder, 6 decibels louder, something like that, something obvious and noticeable and measurable and everything like that. Would it shock me at all if they had remastered those soundtracks for the DTS:X version and they had boosted up the bass and boosted up the height or the surround effects or something like that? Wouldn't surprise me at all. We've
not a bit
seen that in a ton of discs before where the DTS version, the bass is mastered 10 decibels louder than the Dolby version. Does that mean Dolby bass is always weaker than DTS bass? There is no technical reason why that needs to be the case. It has absolutely nothing to do with the intrinsic qualities of the format itself. But that said, what the mastering engineer decides to do, what the studio might mandate, or what Disney themselves or somebody might mandate be done with a given soundtrack. Yeah, you can make different sounding things in different formats. Yeah. You could have two Dolby Atmos versions where they sound different from each other.
Of course you could. It's similar to that phenomenon where you can have a very good sounding vinyl record and a terrible sounding CD because someone took more care with the record. So, yeah, of course. I don't think it needs to make a difference, but it might for some titles.
So this is another case where could they sound different? Absolutely they could. Uh-huh. If they sound different, do I expect it'll be something like the DTS version has louder bass and boosted height effects? I would absolutely expect that to be the case. Wouldn't shock me whatsoever. Is it going to be attributed to DTS:X audio by people who don't know any better? Yep, they're going to say it's because it's DTS:X audio, but they are wrong. That is a misattribution. It is because it was remastered. If it is different at all, it is because it was remastered and then put into this new container. That would be it. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me in the least if the bass is actually louder when the DTS:X versions arrive.
That is a phenomenon we've seen before. Yeah. Moving on to, hey, Infinite Gary.
Of course, I had to put it in here.
Because I'm here, Infinite Gary's here.
That's right.
What if we're the same person? Infinite Gary. When he's watching sports, Gary tends to dislike hearing crowd noise coming from behind him via his surround speakers. Really? I like it. Because when I go to a football game, everyone's around me.
Yep.
It's very realistic to me. But anyway, different strokes for different folks. On his setups that support it, he'll often use the mono listening mode to eliminate that effect. So he just wants the announcer. But in one of his rooms, he's using a Marantz SR6011 receiver, and it does not offer a mono listening mode. So if he were to temporarily disconnect the speaker wires from all of the other speakers and only leave the center speaker physically connected, would that work for just letting him hear the announcers and not have to deal with the crowd noise? If it's mixed correctly, where the announcers are in the center channel, yeah. That would do it. And remind me not to go watch a football game at Gary's house.
But I also don't know if like he still wants to hear the crack of the bat,
Yeah, if he's watching baseball, sure.
Yeah, some other sounds like that, because
it might be in
like
the middle.
Yeah, that's just, we don't know exactly how it's going to be mixed, because all you're going to hear is what is in the center channel, right? Like when you put your other systems into mono listening mode, all the sounds get condensed down to a single channel. So all the sounds are still present. They're just only being played out of the center. Or if you're using a front, left, and right but playing mono scenario, right? All the sounds are still present, but they're only coming from one or a pair of speakers in front of you. That isn't the same thing as physically disconnecting all the speakers in a surround channel configuration.
Right.
You are only going to hear what's in the center channel. So it completely depends on what has been mixed into that center channel. If it is the announcers and the announcers alone, it means there's no game sounds at all, right? Like if they've put all
it's going to be terrible.
If they put all of the game sounds into the 4 other speakers and none of it into the center, then it could be a little bit weird, right? Because you're watching a baseball game and you don't hear the crack of the bat, you don't hear any of the somebody sliding into a base, you don't hear like nothing other than the announcers. That could be a little bit weird.
It would be a very dead sounding game. In fact, I was complaining just I can't remember which game I was watching, but I was watching a game very recently and I was kind of angry about how dead it sounded. They weren't using the surround channels at all. And the announcers were in the center and they were quite loud. And then it was just sort of a bland sounding crowd in the left,
really
right.
tamed down everywhere else.
Yeah. And so it made the whole game feel boring.
Sure.
It just wasn't alive.
And so,
I
mean, it's game to game, right? It's not like every game sounded like that. So, it's going to depend on exactly what's going on. But I would probably start by just on the Marantz, when you're using this setup for this purpose, I would probably start by just going to the stereo listening mode, because that'll remove any sounds coming from the surround speakers, right? Everything will be coming in front of you at this point. The announcers are still going to sound centered as long as you're sitting in between your front, left, and right speakers. You're going to get that phantom center image. So I would start by doing that, because that's less of a hassle than physically unplugging things. But if that doesn't work, then absolutely. That will eliminate all sounds except for whatever has been mixed into the center channel.
Well, Infinite Gary and I are definitely not the same person.
That's right.
One of my favorite things is good surround sound during a football game. Because when you go to a game, man, oh man, is it coming from around you.
Yep.
All those sounds. In fact, when I go to a football game here in Tuscaloosa with our Giganto Stadium and it gets wild in there, I have to take hearing protection. I take little inserts, like earbuds for my ears, and that's just how it is, because it gets uncomfortable. It's blaring and distorts in my head. So anyway, moving on to Alex. About 10 years ago, Alex put together his home theater system, and then he actually did what we always recommend. He just enjoyed it. Wow.
You might be the first, Alex. You might be the first.
Way to go, Alex. He didn't look up online reviews of what he bought after the fact. Yeah. And he didn't torture himself by constantly looking up the latest and greatest things to make him feel like what he had was instantly obsolete. Fantastic. That is my theory every time. But now, on the other hand, 10 years have gone by and he's no longer up on the latest and he feels like he wants to get back in the game. Okay, I get that.
Yep.
He's moving into a new house. The theater is going into a small loft area. The floor plan of the room is only 11 foot by 12 foot, but it is not an enclosed space. His speakers are all EMP Tech. Remember them?
I sure do. Fun.
E55 Ti towers. So it's EMP Tech E55 Ti towers. And the big E56 CI center plus an ES1010i subwoofer. He used to have the EMP Tech surround speakers, but he has moved a few times over the past 10 years. And at one point, he didn't have a room to dedicate to being a theater, so those surround speakers got sold at some point. At that point. He still has his Denon X2100W AV receiver, along with an APC H10 for power protection. His newest source device is a Sony X800 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. He didn't mention in his email what his display will be. The main thing he asked was what he should buy for his rear surround speakers. EMP Tech isn't around anymore, and RBH doesn't have any inexpensive speaker models for sale anymore. So what do we suggest to go along with his EMP Tech Front 3 speakers? Is there any reason to upgrade his EMP Tech Front 3? And overall, can we help bring him from 2014 into 2024 with his new home theater setup? So I think, 10 years, this is a great time to jump back in and learn a few new things. But this shouldn't be too complicated of a question to answer.
The EMP techs are wonderfully neutral, nice, tell it like it is, don't change the sound of the signal very much at all. So they are going to match really easily and really nicely with any other speakers that are nice and neutral, and you don't have to go crazy expensive. I will say the EMP techs, that Impression series that they had going that we loved, Tom and I loved recommending those for as long as they were around. There was a little bit of high frequency roll-off in them, which we tend to favor in lower cost designs. It prevents them from ever sounding harsh. It tends to make it easier to create a wide sweet spot. So we don't mind that was the design choice whatsoever. And they favored, staying very linear in their response rather than just trying to artificially boost the perception of deeper bass or something like that. So, those are the same characteristics. If you want to have a nice, seamless match going all around you, those are the same characteristics I'm going to look for. And there is something that jumps right to mind, and that is ELAC's debut 2.0 speakers. Those are still available today. You can get them from Amazon. They are in price points where if you were looking at those EMP techs 10 years ago, these price points are going to be like, yep, that seems about right to go along with them. And they have very similar sound characteristics. Nice, neutral, tell it like it is. Little bit of a high frequency roll off, but that's actually going to be a benefit to timbre matching what you already have. Very similar overall characteristic design here. So there's two different sizes of the ELAC debut 2.0 series bookshelf speakers. There's a larger one with a 6.5-inch woofer, and those go for $280 a pair over at Amazon. And there's these little bit smaller with the 5.25-inch woofer that go for $230 a pair. And I think either of those are going to be pretty reasonable price-wise. You can't do a whole lot better. They aren't going to perfectly match the looks of your EMP Tech speakers. Of course, they have a different cabinet, but they are a pretty unassuming black finish rectangle of a speaker.
Another black rectangle, which I love.
Yeah. These aren't going to win any particular awards for like ingenuity in their appearance or something like that, but I also think they blend in absolutely easily to just about any room. Now, in his email, he used the word rear surrounds. I think he just meant surround speakers because he only has his 3 EMP Tech speakers still going here.
The rest of what he says implies it's just surround. Yeah.
And of course, a lot of people refer to the surround speakers as their back speakers or their rear speakers because they're the speakers that go a little bit behind you. So I think that's what's going on here. But just in case he was actually talking about surround backs, the 6th and 7th speakers in a 7-speaker setup in an 11-foot by 12-foot space, I am going to implore you to not have surround back speakers. Stop at 5.
I've had this conversation with a close friend of mine.
Yeah.
She bought 7 speakers in a space about like he's describing, and the rear speakers are just, they're practically hitting you in the head.
Sure, they would have to be just from space constraints. Yeah. And that is far less than ideal. The only thing they can be is distracting. The only thing they can do is actually degrade your experience. And you would be much better off stopping at 5, which I believe is exactly what he was saying. But just because the words rear surrounds were in there in the email, I wanted to clarify that. And I guarantee Tom would be on board with that recommendation of stopping at 5. There is no question about that. Now, he didn't ask specifically about other parts of his system, but I would just say that I think with the space that you're going into, with the fact that you've got yourself an Ultra HD Blu-ray player, I would assume that means you either already have or are planning to have a 4K television, because I don't think he's so far out of the loop that he doesn't know that 4K televisions are around if he went and bought an Ultra HD Blu-ray player. Right. If you want suggestions on displays, by all means ask us. I'm not going to throw a bunch at you right now because I have no idea what type of price range you're looking at, but I will just say I do think you can absolutely justify at this point with an AV receiver upgrade, just because it's going to be a little bit challenging connecting Ultra HD services, streaming services, and that Ultra HD Blu-ray player of yours, and getting the best experience on a 4K television in this setup if you don't upgrade your AV receiver, because yours is old enough, it doesn't support eARC, right? So you'd either be giving up some of the audio quality because you'd have to plug your 4K sources directly into the TV,
right,
and then send HDMI ARC back to your... Actually, I don't even know if the 2100W did ARC. It might have to be an optical audio connection.
Yeah.
I didn't look that up ahead of time, but it's going to be one or the other. It's going to be ARC at quote unquote best, and optical for sure would be an option, but it's not going to be eARC. I know that for sure. So you'd either be taking a bit of a degrading on the audio quality, or there's no way to pass a 4K video signal through that AV receiver. So along with this new pair of speakers, it's going to be time for a new AV receiver. I would encourage you to stick with Denon. That hasn't changed in these past number of years. Sometimes people think Tom and I are just Denon shills because they tend to be the ones we recommend. The instant there is one that is better features at a better price, we're going to recommend it. We don't care.
If he wants to hear from someone else, I like Yamaha receivers.
Sure,
so,
sure. But for right now, I think in terms of the value of the features for the price, we still like Denon the best at the moment. The instant that changes, we're going to change our recommendations. So it's not that we're Denon only, but you're coming from Denon. It's not going to be some crazy change to you. And I think something like X2800 would be fantastic in your scenario, unless you have plans to go to 4 overhead speakers or something like that. But I would kind of doubt it in an 11-foot by 12-foot space. So I think something like that, look, going one step up to the X3800, pretty big gap in price. That's why I'm saying I think the X2800 probably makes the most sense for you. That would be a fantastic choice, just as I'll throw it out there for you to consider.
And, I just want to say I respect the pulling back from reading everything for a while. I really respect that. I've had to force myself to do that when I've bought various big things and wait a while, then jump back in. This intervening 10 years, it is going to be a nice time to get a new receiver and television.
Oh yeah.
It's time for that. But
there are noticeable, genuine, easy to say, yeah, that was worth paying some money 10 years later. Yeah, you're going to be able to see and hear it.
That's right. That was, I'm trying to think of how many years did we go with a Panasonic plasma before we got an OLED. I think it was 13 years. I think it was 13 years. And boy, was that better. And I thought that plasma was the moon and stars, man. That thing was amazing when we got it.
If you could get a 77-inch OLED for your 11-foot by 12-foot space, it's gonna be nice.
Now you know that's Rob talking when you got a small room and a giant screen.
That's not that giant.
I know it's pretty big, but that would be awful nice. Hey, speaking of big OLEDs, Martin has a question. So Rob got that 77-inch LG G3 OLED with micro lens array, and he's very happy about it. And he immediately echoed what Martin had read from Artings when they made their recommendations. There are some measurable improvements, but most people should just get the C3 instead, because the majority of the time they don't actually look noticeably different. So is micro lens array just marketing? Is it full-on Emperor's new clothes? Did he detect some buyer's remorse from Rob? Was the 83-inch C3 close enough in price that would have been better to go bigger rather than brighter? What you say, Rob? Can you see it yet?
So look, it is not Emperor's new clothes. No. You can spot the difference, and you can measure it. There can be a difference. It's more a matter of, are you I live for the small differences type of person? And some people are that. And if you know you're that, that's going to make this decision easy for you. Are you I would rather have a little bit more money left in my pocket and I care about the vast majority of the time, and the once in a while small differences, not a big deal to me. And that's a completely reasonable way to be. So yeah, that's where it is, because it is the once in a while small differences. It is the specular highlights that with the micro lens array are able to get discernibly brighter, definitely measurably brighter. It's all backed up. The data's right there. Nobody really disagrees. It's just that some people are out there they live for those small differences and they're championing to everybody that this is what you have to do. And I don't agree. I don't agree with that whatsoever.
Right.
Because the difference in going from somebody had an edge-lit LCD TV and they got an OLED, any OLED.
Oh, any OLED's going to be a huge upgrade from that.
Huge difference. Huge difference. Then you go from your B2 OLED, right? One of the least expensive OLEDs from a couple of years ago. You go from your B2 OLED to a G3 with the MLA, and you're like, oh, like if you're the person who lives for the little difference, you're like, oh my goodness, do you see that glint off of that bumper? Like, it looked great on my B2 OLED, but it's like, I can notice it even more on the G3. And that's what you live for. Great. That's who, you are the person that the G3 OLED is for.
Right.
But if you're the one who's like, I just spent a whole bunch of money, I'm like, most of the time, I don't see any difference here. And that's what it is.
If you are buying a TV and you have the money and you're only upgrading your television and not buying other components, and you are the kind of person that's picky and that will really enjoy it, then that's what you buy.
So, do I have any buyer's remorse? No, I don't. But that does come with a caveat because 83 inches is actually too large for the space that I have. It would be the case where if I sat where I can't move my seat any further back. There's nowhere in my room to move it further back, or I wouldn't be able to open the door that's behind me. So I can't move my seat further back. I can't move the TV any further forward. The wall is where it is. And if that is my seating distance. And if I went with the 83 inch, I would have to start turning my head a little bit to see the edges of the screen. And I personally dislike that. 77 inches is perfect. It's just right. It fills my preferred field of view, and I don't want to go any larger than that. So that's a caveat specific to my current setup. But also, I didn't pay full price for the 77-inch G3.
That's right.
I didn't even pay the sale price. I took a minor gamble, and I went with a Best Buy open box certified unit. I have purchased 3 prior Best Buy certified open box televisions, and they were all great. I kept all 3 of those previous ones, so I was willing to give it a try. I had in the past purchased a refurbished OLED, and it was not flawless. I somewhat regretted that. So I was a little bit hesitant because OLED, open box, I was a little bit hesitant, but as Best Buy, it was pretty easy to return it if there was something wrong with this particular unit. And they had great track record with me personally before on their certified open box units. I like, give it a try, test it out. It's another great unit. It's another one I kept. And that meant that the price that I paid for the 77-inch G3 versus an 83-inch C3, the scenario that he pointed out there, I would have had to have paid $600 more for the C3, which is a not insignificant amount of money. Now, that would have been, less than going the other direction, right? If I had paid full price for the G3, then the 83-inch C3 actually would have been less expensive. So that would have changed the thing, right? If I had paid full price for the G3, then I probably would have returned it and exchanged it for a 77-inch C3, right? If it was at those prices. Because even though I do care about the small differences, I don't live for them to the point that I would have spent like $1,500 more.
Money is an object.
It absolutely is. So it is because I got that reduced price on an open box unit, and because I couldn't really go to 83-inch. So yeah, there you go.
All right, that sounds good. I got you. So yeah, if you have a very large room, the bigger TV is worth more, I think, than the ever so slight upgrade in picture quality.
Well, I mean, if I had the larger room, I would have gone to the 83-inch C3 all day long. Absolutely.
All right. Well, there you go. That's a good way to think about it. Shall we move on to Brandon? How you feeling, Rob?
Oh, I'll make it.
Okay, let's move on to Brandon and see if we can't get the 2-hour club happy. Brandon wrote to us back in November. Tom happened to be away that week too. He's got Ascend Sierra Raw speakers up front, and he wanted to get some in-wall speakers that would be an upgrade and better match his front speakers over the golden ear in-walls that he was using at the time. He was looking at Sonance. Is it Sonance? Do we say Sonance? Sonance.
Yeah.
It's so with a long O. Mm-hmm. He was looking at Sonance, since Ascend themselves have often suggested Sonance for in-ceiling speakers to go along with their own in-room speakers. But we threw a bit of a curveball at him and suggested Aperion Audio's Theatris series, since we liked their folded ribbon tweeters, similar output capabilities, and that they also checked a box for Brandon by being physically larger than his current golden ear in-walls, so it would make installing them relatively relatively easy since he wouldn't need to patch anything. He also wanted some new wedge-shaped speakers with the caveat that they be able to fit on an 8-inch beam and come in a white finish option. We suggested sticking with AVRant for that too, with the Novus A5 wedge-shaped speaker. I do recall this. He was a little surprised, but quite content with those suggestions. They did seem to nicely match what he was after. A minor fly in the ointment is that AVRant only offers black grill covers. He wants white grill covers for all of them. For the fabric grill covers on the wedge-shaped speakers up high, that was something he figured he could take care of himself DIY. But for the in-wall speakers, he actually has a more specific need. He has both elderly and young folks in his house, and one of the in-wall speakers is right beside the set of 2 stairs that go down into the lowered theater room. People end up putting their hands right on the speaker grill far more often than he would like, but it was okay with the golden ear in-walls because they came with metal grills.
Yeah.
He's seen plenty of other in-wall speakers that also use metal grills, so he's a bit disappointed that AVRant doesn't offer them. Do we feel the sound quality of the AVRant Theatris in-walls is so superior to other in-wall speaker options for his purposes that it would be worth trying to make a DIY metal grill solution? Or is there a simple alternative he could just buy, maybe from RBH? What do we suggest he do? That's an interesting little problem. We all have to live with our humans, don't we?
Oh, I got thoughts on this.
All right.
And I'm gonna start with the one that I think Tom would agree with most, which is this will require a bit of patching on your drywall, but move that surround speaker where people are putting their hands on it. Even if you're like, I don't want to move it farther forward into the theater because of where that might make it line up with the
move it up
seats. Move it up.
Yep.
Move it up. Elevating your surround speakers is perfectly fine. And I can't, if people are putting their hand on it, it's got to be pretty low.
Yeah.
Right?
You got room to go up. Just go up. Just have everybody walk in the room and see where they touch.
Yes.
Put a little pencil mark. Put it above that.
Yeah. Because, I mean, they can't be, like, if they're putting their hand on that speaker to steady themselves, it's not like they're reaching way above their head to do that, right? Like they're putting it at shoulder height. It can't be that high. So 100% my suggestion to you is just raise that surround speaker. Yes, that'll mean a drywall patch where the current one is. Yeah. And on the other side too, because you'll probably want to have them match, no doubt, right? But that's I mean, drywall patching is not that difficult. And if you don't want to do it yourself, there are absolutely people who don't cost piles and piles of money who can do a drywall patch for you. Yeah. So that's my number one suggestion for sure, and I'm pretty sure that's what Tom would say. Now, the other side of it is, I don't know this for sure at all, but contact AVRant, because it's not out of the question that they're able to do some customization when it comes to their speaker grills. I don't know if they'd be able to do something like a metal grill, whether they could contract that out to somebody or whatever. But it's not completely out of the question. If you haven't reached out to them via email or a phone call, certainly do that. It's free to do that. The worst they can tell you is, no, sorry, we don't do that. And we're back to where we are. But I would certainly ask, because sometimes companies like that are like, yeah, we can make you a white grill. That's no problem. Or, maybe even a metal one. Who knows? So I would certainly ask them. Could there be a DIY solution to this? Yeah, I mean, you've got the frame for the grill that's already there. I don't really see a reason why a metal fabricator wouldn't be able to create similar sized pins, similar sized frame with a metal grill. There's certainly somebody who should be able to create that, just on a for hire basis. I don't know where to point you exactly, but that certainly seems like something that's doable, right? Like a couple of speaker
feels like
grills.
Technology allows that.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that people don't need a lot, but someone knows how to do that.
Yeah, we're literally talking about some metal mesh just in the right shape. So that's right. That seems like something that could be made. Absolutely. I still think it would be better to just move the speakers, because even with a metal grill, I don't love the idea of someone just resting their weight on it. But that seems absolutely doable. So yeah, to answer the other part of the question, like over on RBH's side, if you're just buying what they sell as their, here's the thing that we sell, their models that come with the folded ribbon tweeters, they also come with cloth grills, not metal grills. RBH does have some in-wall speakers that come with metal grills. For example, their VM616 from their Visage series, but it doesn't have anything similar in driver technology to what we're talking about here. We're back to it being very similar to what Sonance offers. So yeah, we're 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Those VM616s tend to go for around $900 each, but they're dealer only, right? You can only buy them through dealers. You can't just order them online. So overall, I think the easiest solution by far is to stick with the AVRant Theatrus and just move them higher.
Also, if people are reaching up and holding onto the wall, could you not install some sort of rail that they could grab?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be...
Yeah, you could leave the speaker where it is and just install a railing in front of it, and then they'll reach for that instead.
Yeah, if they're reaching in that direction, then just put a rail right a little bit lower than that. And
even better, Lee, good idea.
Just put a rail. You're supposed to have a rail. Be ADA compliant. Come on. Another question. Do we have any info on the price and dimensions of the new SVS Ultra Elevation wedge-shaped speakers that they announced at CES? Yes, we do.
Yeah, so I don't know the dimensions for sure just yet. We do know the price. They're going to be priced at $900 a pair. So that's going to be the going sale price there for the Ultra Elevation speakers. Now, just putting two and two together, I think we can sort of estimate what size they're going to be because we got the Prime Elevations. Those already exist. Those are using a smaller 4.5-inch woofer, and their dimensions, of course, the depth varies because they're wedge shaped, but like the part that you're mounting on your wall is 9.25 inches by 5.5 inches. So 9.25 inches tall if they're the long way, and 5.25 inches wide if they're that way. That's the footprint that you're trying to mount it with the Prime Elevations. So the Ultra Elevations use a larger 5.25-inch woofer. It's going to be a bigger speaker for sure. The cabinet's going to be larger than the Prime Elevation. And if we just sort of compare like the Prime Elevation size to the bookshelf speakers that also use a 4.5-inch woofer, it's pretty close. So if we look at the bookshelf speaker in SVS's lineup that uses a 5.25-inch woofer, then we're looking at it being 11.5 to 12 inches tall by around 7 to 7.5 inches wide. I think that's a pretty good guess at what those Ultra Elevations are going to be. So not exact dimensions, but I think I'm in the ballpark there. I'd be a little bit surprised if I'm way out with that estimation.
Oh, I'd be surprised too. Shall we continue on to Stan?
Yeah.
All right. Stan has questions. Stan wants to consider the excitement about surprisingly affordable 98-inch to 100-inch TVs from a different perspective. What do you do when your 100-inch TV reaches the end of its life? You take it outside and lean it against the telephone pole. That's what you do. Somebody will come get it. Some areas, not all, unfortunately, have recycling centers for electronics, but some, like in his area, have limitations on large items. And hauling a 100-inch, 150-pound TV to any location for disposal seems like quite the hassle. Ultra short throw projectors might not be able to match the picture quality of a 100-inch flat panel, but they sure are easier to remove and dispose of when they reach the end of their life. What are our thoughts on this? I actually do think about this on occasion because I kind of care that we don't just fill landfills and also who's going to come get it. But I jokingly say put it out on the street because somebody's going to come get it and it's their problem. We've done that with stuff. People have taken broken toilet seats from the curb in front of our house. So people will take anything. But yeah, with a size limitation, you would have to call around. There's probably a place you could take it to, but you'd have to take it there.
Yeah, this is not a trivial thing. No. Absolutely not. You're absolutely right to think about this and consider this. I mean, I'm fortunate. You know, where I live, we have quite a robust recycling program. They will take electronics of any size, any weight, any description, and we have that available where I live, but that is not the case everywhere.
We have that here too, believe it or not, even in our small city. I don't know, though, if they would take something that large.
Right.
I'd have to call and ask them. They'll take all kinds of stuff. I've taken computers and other electronics to them before, no problem. There's a lot of recycling happens in this town. I'm kind of surprised.
Also worth looking into, there are some retailers, including Best Buy in many areas. I can't speak for them in every area, but in many areas, they will, as part of their installation of a new TV service, remove your old television. Similar to, many places you buy a new mattress, they'll take your old mattress away. There's typically a fee involved with that, or you have to at least purchase the installation service, and then maybe the removal of your old one is part of that. But there is, usually an additional cost over just the cost of the new thing that you're buying. But that might be the most likely option in areas where you don't have a robust recycling program where you can take it there. I mean, yeah, that's going to be a hassle either way, but hey, you rent a U-Haul for a day and you can move your 100 or 115-inch, LCD TV to where it needs to go as long as they're willing to accept it. But if you're in an area where you don't really have a facility that accepts, electronics of that size and weight, your most likely scenario would be something like, hopefully the Best Buys in your area offer that service where they will collect your old television. Because, at least they have the warehouses that can, deal with that type of size of item. That's probably the most likely scenario. And that might be an incentive. You end up shopping at a retailer you didn't shop at before, because Amazon's not going to do that for you, right?
Nope.
But some electronics store, if you're buying a new TV from them and having them install it, and they offer removal of your old one, that could be the best way to approach it.
And don't forget, you could reuse it as a dining table.
Right, yes. There's a
kind of
pretty good surface to work on there with a 100 or a 110 or 115 inch.
Yeah, that's good 8 people for Thanksgiving,
That's
right?
right.
All right, moving on to Jonathan. Jonathan has subscribed to DirecTV satellite service since 2008. They charge an additional $7 a month for every additional TV box, and he has a total of 4 TV boxes in his house. Ouch. With his service, he can also access DirecTV streaming via their app on his phone or a streaming box like his Roku. And their streaming-only plan is less expensive than their satellite plan to begin with. Plus, he would no longer need to pay monthly for additional satellite boxes. He's tempted by the cost savings. If you have good internet speeds, do it. However, he watches a lot of sports, and when he does so, he usually has a group chat going, plus he's watching reactions on X. He tried watching a game with his satellite box on one TV and using the streaming version via his Roku on a second TV. The streaming version was 25 to 30 seconds behind the satellite version. That's a true phenomenon. And that amount of delay would definitely be a problem for his group chat. Yeah, I've actually experienced a phenomenon, not at my house, where you hear people cheer in the next apartment or house, and then you get it. He understands this isn't just an internet service issue. He's got 1 gig service, and there's no issue at all with signal quality or buffering or anything. The delay is on the transmission side of things, right? Yes. So do we think the delay will ever get short enough that he'll be able to go streaming only? For now, he figures he'll probably drop down to 2 satellite boxes and then use streaming on his other 2 TVs, but that doesn't save him as much money as going streaming only. What do we think? Look, I'm a cheapskate. I'm going streaming only and dealing with the 25-second delay. I do it now. My chats, I text with people while I'm watching football games. I'm on Facebook and I'm on X, and there are reactions happening. I don't find it to be that problematic. I just don't type that fast. I have been ahead, actually, while watching my streaming. I've been ahead of a friend of mine watching his streaming, and I was actually quicker than him. I went, like, oh my God, interception. He's like, what? Oh my God, interception. So, I don't find it to be that problematic. And I really do communicate a lot during football games. So that's just me. If it's really going to bother you, how much money is it worth to you? But going all streaming is just nicer and it's cheaper.
I can see where he's coming from, and I mean, he did the experiment. So it sounds like he's decided for his tastes, it's a little bit too much to bear, having, something close to a 30-second. And I can get that. I can understand where he's coming from. Do I think it's ever going to get to where that signal delay in the streaming version is, close enough to imperceptible from the satellite or cable TV broadcast?
No.
I have my doubts about that. I know that, all the hype around 5G when they were hyping that up was like, everything's going to be instantaneous, but it's not the the transmission, across the wires. It's all the relays that it has to go through. It's encoding process that is taking place because they are encoding it prior to streaming it, which is actually the biggest part of it. So could that delay decrease? That is possible.
It
right?
probably will over time, but they need a buffer sending it out in case something blips.
Yeah.
So you're never going to have nothing compared to the old days of analog TV when live was really live.
Right.
Back in the day when the camera's sweeping electron beam literally matched yours and only the speed of light made a difference, or the speed of electricity. So
as processors continually get more and more powerful, as long as we don't severely, increase the resolution and all that type of thing that the processors are having to deal with, and the encoding process could get a little bit faster than it is right now. I could see that delay dropping to the 15 to 20 second type of range at some point in the future. I don't think that's out of the question because some of that delay definitely is just the encoding or transcoding, as the case might be.
I would like to see I wish I could see his actual use of social media and texting, chatting, because again, I really stay pretty active during the games, and I'm surprised that 25 to 30 second delay is affecting him versus his friends. That's wild.
Yeah,
he must be really going at it like faster
I think his original idea of just dropping 2 of the boxes, keeping the same service but dropping 2 of the boxes. I mean, that's saving you $14. That's not nothing. That makes sense as at least a first step for sure. I think that then gives you the opportunity to experiment more with having one TV on the satellite feed, one TV on the streaming feed, and seeing, try watching it on the streaming feed with your chat going during maybe a game that you don't care quite as much about. Give that a try and see if you end up agreeing with Lee. Like, okay, I'm aware the delay exists, but I'm able to deal with it. If not, then you know where you have to stay, at least for the time being.
I'm also fascinated that geosynchronous orbit is not enough of a delay in itself. That does take a second, to go up and come down.
Well, I mean, internet things aren't going up to satellites.
No, they're not.
For the broadcast,
yeah, for his direct TV broadcast, it is geosynchronous satellite, it has its own little delay. But you would think that would, require some buffering.
I was gonna suggest what you might want to do is go to an antenna setup.
Yeah.
Because then you can bug your friends who are on cable TV, because there's a delay in cable TV, there's a delay in satellite TV versus the over-the-air transmission with an antenna. So that's maybe what you should do, is get ahead of everebody else.
If it's broadcast TV. So much sports is not broadcast TV.
That's right.
Right. So there's that problem. But I'd like to know more about exactly what he's doing during the games, because I'm fascinated now.
Yeah.
How
I do
fast
also
are you?
wonder if this ends up sorting itself out in a different way at some point, because most of the cable companies are going towards IPTV, right? They're all shifting over there. So do I see a future where we over-the-air TV, that's a government thing. As long as they mandate that there are over-the-air broadcasts, that's going to be there. But of course, plenty of games that aren't broadcast over the air anymore. So could there be a future where there really isn't the cable TV and the satellite TV service? The companies are still around, but they're just doing everything via internet protocol. I don't think that's out of the question at all. Yeah. In which case, everybody ends up equal at some point. Everybody's on the IPTV service. And even though it is delayed from reality versus someone who's in the stadium watching it, everybody who's watching it on their televisions is watching it with a similar delay. I think that's a possibility for the future. That would be just wait for it. So I think, start with your experiment. You're saving $14 a month. That's the most reasonable thing. And then, do the experiment. And if you discover that likely you don't actually mind that 25 second delay as much as you thought you would, then you could go streaming only at that point.
I feel like they could put a little delay on the broadcast signal to match what they know is a consistent delay on
Good luck convincing them to do that.
Yeah, that would be more trouble, wouldn't it? But anyway, I haven't found it to be terrible.
So I'm going to call it there. We're going to leave one on the list, which is Greg. Now, I don't feel too bad because Greg's did come in technically on Monday, and I always say I do the cutoff for the topic list on Sunday, but just in case we had time left over, I put Greg's on the list there for this week, but he will be first up next week, and that is fair enough because I have my unofficial rule.
this is an impressive effort on your part, given how you feel. So good
Believe
job,
me,
man. You're
I'm
hanging
getting
in
off
there.
this call pretty quick, not to be rude to Lee, just because
That's okay.
I'm feeling like, that's going to need to end pretty quick here. But before we do that, we will go back up to thank our listeners of the week, because that is very important. And these are people who are supporting this podcast, some of them financially. They might have done so via PayPal this week. I have no idea. Only Tom sees those when they come in. So if you do want to donate sort of one time, or you have the option to do it recurring through PayPal as well, you can come to our website, avrant.com, and on the right-hand side of the desktop version, there is a thing that says support AVRant. There's a logo of a cup of coffee there, and that'll take you to PayPal, so you could do that if you please. Any that I missed this week, we'll mention them next week when Tom is back. But other people who are supporting us financially are doing so through Patreon. That is patreon.com/AVRant podcast. You can go there to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation, and we have 133 patrons. So thank you all very much for your financial support.
Yes.
Yeah, other listeners of the week, Aaron continues to send in the Canada-only movie codes. So, yep, if he keeps doing it, we'll keep mentioning him. So thank you, Aaron. Jay, thank you for giving Tom permission to use your photos on avgadgets.com, where Tom is the editor-in-chief. And then thank you very much for all the notes of gratitude and encouragement. We very much appreciate them. Those came in from Jay, Aaron, Sasi, Gurinder, Stan, Jeff, and Greg this week. So thank you so much. We very much appreciate it. We are here to answer your home theater and AV questions, and to get those questions answered, all you have to do is ask us. You ask us via email, by far the best way to reach us, question@avrant.com. That's our email address, question@avrant.com. Sometimes people still ask, how do I ask you a question? And I'm like, I don't know how you missed it.
How do you miss that?
Question@avrant.com.
Question. Just remember the word question.
That is it. So, Lee, thank you so much for stepping in.
You're
pinch
very
hitting
welcome.
for us once again. Really do appreciate it. Any closing words before we wrap up this episode?
No, I just hope I haven't disturbed anyone with too much clarity on my new camera and system. My voice might even be too clear now. I don't know. I've
Come and
upgraded
see,
some-
but look away if it's too much.
Don't look. I haven't put my oil of Olay on my
That
face.
must be it. Well, thank you so much there. So, let's see here. On behalf of Tom Andry and for AVRant, I am Rob H.
And I'm Lee Overstreet. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.